Have you noticed that search results are worse than they used to be? It's not just you. The internet is flooded with low-quality websites designed specifically to show up in search results, earn your click, and earn ad revenue. This was already becoming a problem 10 years ago, but its spread was slowed by the fact that somebody needed to write these unhelpful nothingy articles unless they wanted their website to just be a literal list of buzzwords. Over the past few years, however, this problem has gotten much worse entirely because of generative AI. Suddenly, almost the entire process of procuring topics, writing filler articles, and publishing them online could be automated. This process, which previously took some modicum of skill and perhaps a few hours, can now be done by almost anybody in just a few minutes. If you're good at recognizing AI writing, then you've probably noticed this too. It's become nearly impossible to find human-generated content online unless it's on some place like YouTube or Reddit, and AI is even slowly creeping into those places too. Pretty much all objective research shows that the quality of online search results is getting much worse because of AI. This wouldn't be so much of an issue if the AI-generated content was reliable, but unfortunately, it just isn't. In October of 2023, researchers at Stanford and UC Berkeley published How is ChatGPT's Behavior Changing Over Time? The paper evaluated how well ChatGPT 3.5 and 4 were able to handle 7 different types of tasks at various points in time. They found that results were highly variable and didn't necessarily get better with time. For example, GPT-4 March 2023 was reasonable at identifying prime versus composite numbers with 84% accuracy. But GPT-4 June 2023 was poor on these same questions with 51% accuracy. They note, improving the model's performance on some tasks, for example with fine-tuning on additional data, can have unexpected side effects on its behavior in other tasks. Consistent with this, both GPT 3.5 and GPT-4 got worse on some tasks but saw improvements in other dimensions. The problem isn't that AI is incapable of getting things right. Actually, it gets things right pretty often. The problem is that it could get things wrong at any time, and there's no indicators of when it happens. With models like ChatGPT and Gemini, where changes are frequent and development activity is secret, its ability to perform a given task could degrade at literally any moment with no warning. To be clear, language models aren't useless. I've personally found them useful for helping me understand programming concepts and identifying obscure pieces of media that I couldn't remember the names of. But because you can never be sure that it's right, it's extra important to fact-check the information it gives you. And this is becoming increasingly difficult to do when web search results are flooded with content written by the very same AI that you're fact-checking. The old saying, "you can't trust everything you see on the internet," is more true now than it has ever been. The machine cannot be implicitly trusted, but it's also quite difficult to disprove its lies. And it always speaks with a remarkably confident and authoritative-looking tone, even when spouting complete nonsense. The optimistic among you may be thinking, well, sure, it's not great now, but we're still in the early stages. AI is going to keep getting better and better. About that. The general argument for exponential AI growth is that if we just keep feeding the machine more and more training data, and we keep making the models bigger and deeper, eventually AI will become so sophisticated that it will be able to reason its way through completely unique and novel problems, maybe even surpassing humanity in intelligence.
If you just keep adding more and more data, or bigger and bigger models, or a combination of both, ultimately you will move beyond just recognizing cats and you'll be able to do anything. Right? That's the idea. You show enough cats and dogs and eventually the elephant just is implied.
Research on current generative AI models shows that there are diminishing returns for adding more training data, and we can easily see this in practice. ChatGPT launched almost 2 years ago, and there's little compelling evidence that it has gotten universally better with time. We mostly see improvements in a few areas at a time, accompanied by regressions in other areas. Models like Llama 3B are significantly smaller than ChatGPT and can even run on my MacBook. and yet their performance is much more similar than you would expect to see for a linear data-to-growth relationship. Gathering exponentially more training data is already hard enough, but it's made even more difficult by how hard it is to avoid AI-generated content online. AI models trained on their own output tend to exaggerate their own faults and produce decreasingly diverse outputs. They don't just stagnate, they actually get worse. This gets even more difficult when you consider the legal and ethical challenges surrounding the training data. Generative AI, like language models and especially image models, are trained on unlicensed, copyrighted materials, and there's still legal battles being fought over whether this is acceptable. If individual people can be fined for personal use piracy, then I don't see why $80 billion OpenAI or $2 trillion Google should be allowed to profit from it. But that's not up to me, so whatever. Regardless of how these legal battles play out, some other big decisions regarding AI are going to have to be made before long. Large model generative AI needs a ton of electricity to work, with some estimates saying that a single ChatGPT query uses as much power as leaving a light bulb on for 20 minutes. The companies operating these models have drastically increased their carbon emissions in order to keep up with demand for these services, and they don't even turn a profit from it. Pretty much the only big tech company profiting from the AI craze is Nvidia, who manufactures most of the hardware these models are running on. Companies like Microsoft, Google, and OpenAI are losing money on their AI services in the hopes that they'll be able to earn back their money later on. It's a gold rush, plain and simple, and the evidence is looking grim for whether there's any gold to be found. Eventually, these companies are going to have to decide whether to keep burning money on these AI services. If they stay online, there's a good chance they'll never get much better than they are now. If they get shut down, then we'll have to contend with the question of why any of this ever mattered. Technology has always pushed industry forward. The Industrial Revolution allowed us to produce products on unprecedented scales. The rise of modern computers has made it possible to compute and process data on a scale that was previously unthinkable. The internet has made information exchange around the world so easy that we no longer even think about it. AI, by comparison, hasn't changed a whole lot. It has had almost no economic impact, and although it's able to replace the very most basic levels of thought work, it's not even close to replacing human labor on a large scale. Journalists, mathematicians, scientists, programmers, artists, and so on still outperform AI in important ways, and the evidence suggests that it could be a very long time before AI catches up. The challenge of making AI more reliable or capable of self-correction might literally be an unsolvable problem. When I say that AI is useless, I don't mean that there is no possible way for it to be useful. I only mean that it does not have a net positive impact on the world in any meaningful way. There's really nothing that AI can do that a human can't. It's convenient, sure, but it also contributes to misinformation and the degradation of the internet. It devalues human work but can't replace it. Economically, half the quality and an eighth of the price might be a worthwhile trade-off, but it's still only half the quality. Far from the vision of a super-intelligent AI that either perfects our society or destroys it, AI is most likely to simply take over low-end thought work and do it less reliably than humans. AI is here to stay, and I know that I don't really accomplish anything by railing against its use. I actually do use generative language models sometimes, in moderation, because it can be a useful tool. However, it's also a nuisance, and in many contexts, it's little more than a toy. If I were to sum up my thoughts on generative AI as a whole, I would simply say that AI is terrible.